Okay, so it looks like our boy, the CEO of Charles Schwab, has a lot to say about the SVB bank collapse. And as you guys know, this is huge news, especially if you're a wealthy person, because you're kind of concerned if you can't take your money out of the bank, you know what I'm saying? And pretty much with SVB collapsing and people going to the bank, trying to pull their money out, not being able to do it, people who have a similar bank account are kind of like, wait, hold on. Is my bank like this? Like, if I want to pull out my 1.5 million, am I not going to have that ability? So, it's pretty interesting, and it'd be pretty interesting to see what a CEO of, what I'm saying, somebody who works with these type of people, these type of wealthy people every day, what he would really have to think about it. So let's go ahead and see what's going on with this.
If your child has diabetes, you'll love how easy Dexcom G7 is. It's on, and he's off. You can see his glucose numbers right on your phone, so you can always be there for him with Dexcom G7.
Thank you, Kelly and Walt. Thank you for joining me. I know you don't speak out very often, but we're going through some pretty extraordinary times in your world right now. Thank you.
Yes, and thanks for the invitation. I actually learned last night about 10 p.m. that your network had emailed a staffer in our organization about me coming on yesterday, and unfortunately I didn't, as I mentioned, I didn't realize that till last evening. Of course, I've been on many times with you before, and so I just want to apologize for that. If I would have known, I likely would have been on, but
wow. Somebody messing up at Charles Schwab?
We have to address what's happened with your stock first and foremost.
And Nancy, the secretary, messed up
for contagion after a collapse of a bank in Silicon Valley that did a lot of lending to venture capital firms. But that's what's happened. Your stock is down almost 30% over the past week, including today's bounce. Why?
Well, I think there's been a degree of confusion on two sides of our firm. The first one is the difference between a brokerage operation and a banking operation. I
great
see people
point.
Speaking about.
Let me say something. I think that's a great point that he's trying to make. I think the reason why Charles Schwab is taking such a hit is because people are, like he said, forgetting the difference between a hedge fund and a bank. Realistically, it's the banks that are being hit, and it's not even all banks. It's more so of those banks that wealthy investors would really want to mess with, like SVB, Silicon Valley Bank, crypto banks, things like that are really getting hit by this. But what happens is it's almost like collateral damage. It's like banks and financial institutions that really don't have anything to do with this are still getting hit because people are wondering, like, oh, like let's say me, for instance, I have Bank of America. You know what I'm saying? Bank of America is more of a commercial, like bank of the people. The regular person will have a Bank of America account. Not many regular people will have an account at some place like SVB. So SVB gets hit. And it deals with a completely different type of circumstance than Bank of America would. And Bank of America is actually very shielded from dealing with the same type of circumstances that SVB is. But let's say a person like me, I see on the news, oh, wow, there was a bank collapse. A person couldn't get their money. Now I'm going to go to Bank of America and try to get mine. Or I have less trust in my Bank of America or my, let's say in his case, Charles Schwab or my TD Ameritrade account that I have because of this. And that's why it's getting hit so hard. Just straight collateral damage.
FDIC, and they have a fairly good understanding of that when you deposit at a bank, the bank takes those deposits and invests them. They are part of the bank balance sheet. And then the FDIC provides insurance up to $250,000. At least that's the way it's been since, I believe, 2008. Brokerage assets are completely different. So we have about $7.4 trillion that clients have entrusted us with at Schwab. And over $7 trillion of that sits on the brokerage side. Brokerage assets are held separate. They are segregated from Schwab assets. This is done under what's called the SEC Consumer Protection Rule. And so those assets are not commingled with us. I even have heard some pundits talk about SIPC and tried to compare it relative to FDIC. And of course, there's no comparison. These are segregated assets, and SIPC kicks in largely only in a situation of fraud. course, the SEC requires us to report on the segregation, and we do so regularly, and they audit it. So I think that's the first bit of confusion that went on. People began to conflate SIPC and FDIC and didn't really understand the segregation of client securities from the rest of Schwab.
But you do have deposits, right? I mean, you do have a pretty robust bank business inside of the company.
We do.
And that, I think, is where the concerns are.
We do, and that's the second one that I want to try to address. Our bank is very conservatively managed. If you look at the holdings of the bank, we have about 10% of.
See, there's a problem. There's the thing, though. You notice she made sure that he was like, he was like, please don't ask about this. Please don't ask us about our bank and everything like that. And now he has to say it's very, very conservatively managed. So that money that he was talking about earlier, how the banks take your money and invest it, and if they lose it, you're only liable to really get $250,000 back. His bank is essentially a bank. It does the same thing, which is why his stock price took such a hit and why he probably was hoping that she wouldn't have spoken on that. You know what I'm saying? And everything like that. But she should, and it's going to be interesting to see what he has to say. But right now, as Coach Greg would say, he's shuffling. He's like, oh, well, yeah, but see, like, our bank not like those other banks because our bank is real conservative with our trading and, and everything like that. No, there's no way we would ever lose your money because we're more conservative about how we trade and invest your money than those other guys. You know what I'm saying? But I'm gonna let him get to it.
Of client deposits outstanding.
I'm gonna let him eat. I'm going to let them eat.
Collateralized almost exclusively to our clients, very, very low risk. And then we have about 80% in U.S. government-backed paper. Within that, effectively you're operating with virtually no credit risk. From a liquidity standpoint, we have access to very substantial liquidity. Arguably, we have a level of liquidity.
And that's what people want to know about the liquidity. Can I get my money back?
Our entire bank sweep deposits, around $280 billion. So I understand that there were banks that got into trouble. We have a reasonable understanding as to how they did so. But those applications, we don't believe, apply at Schwab at all. We do understand, though, that when our stock price went down at a rate that was in some manners consistent with some of the regionals, that people easily put us up on slides and talked about us in a manner consistent with some of the regional banks. Completely different model, completely different. You mentioned earlier that 80% plus of our deposits in FDIC insured balances
are insured.
Banks that have run into trouble are at fractions of that number.
But as you say, you've been swept in. Have you seen any deposit outflows? What are you seeing from customers?
No, actually, what we're seeing is asset inflows to the firm in significant numbers. So in February, our clients brought in almost $42 billion in net.
Now, he's talking about asset inflows, probably not recently, but as you guys know, that's pretty much, from what I've seen, that's pretty much, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, that's what I see as, like, people putting their trust in the bank, you know what I'm saying, and everything like that. Like, when the FTX, yes, technically the FTX, but when the SVB stuff happened and everything like that, people wanted to pull their money out of banks, and it was all about, does the bank have the money to give? Like, is it out in stocks? Is it being traded? Like, or do you have that actual FDC, stockpile, or outside of the FDC, the stockpile to give people their money back? So that's pretty much what he's saying. But the thing is she's asking him about right now, what we're dealing with right now after this bank collapse. And he's talking about, hey, well, this year we've had an influx of customers coming and bringing more money into the bank, which shows trust in the bank and everything. But the reason why, this is such a concern in the first place is because recently a bank collapsed. So a lot of people are taking out money right now. So we're kind of curious as to, of course you were getting a lot of people bringing in money throughout the year, just as they do every year. But what's going on for you guys right now in this collapse? How are you guys handling this? What's going on with this? Like, don't panic,
Assets to us. March to date, they've averaged about $2 billion a day. Interestingly enough, last Friday, when we were maybe at the heart of the peak maybe of some of these challenges before the actions taken by the Federal Reserve around liquidity, our clients actually brought about $4 billion into the firm that day alone. Another interesting factoid, the number one stock that our clients bought on Friday was Schwab stock.
Schwab.
Power E-Trade gives you an award-winning mobile app with
That's pretty interesting. Yeah, let me know, guys. I want to know what you guys think about that. I think he did a pretty good job in that interview and everything. He had to shuffle a little bit, you know what I'm saying? He had to shuffle a little bit, especially when she started asking him about the banking part of his company, which of course she was going to ask him as a hedge fund. But you guys got to know, obviously, Charles Schwab is not a bank. They are really essentially, you know what I'm saying, a hedge fund, you know. So it's definitely a big difference from SVB, but we're seeing even they are dealing with the fallout. I don't know what Amy, the secretary, was on, because I would assume that if he's trying to prevent bleeding in his stock price, he probably should have addressed CNBC yesterday. That's why he apologized. So I thought that part was kind of funny and everything, but this is definitely a good second topic that we have for here today and everything like that. I want to know what you guys think about it. I want to know, do you guys think that possibly, you know what I'm saying, it could be shady and Charles Schwab is just like any other bank, you know what I'm saying, and they could end up in an SVB type of situation should enough people decide that, hey, I want to pull my money, or, you know, some bad news comes out or something like that. You never know what could happen. Or you guys kind of on the other side and everything like that, and you're like, no, this is completely separate. This is a hedge fund. SVB was a bank. Most of the banks that are affected are more of the wealthy elite type of banks, and they shouldn't, Charles Schwab really shouldn't have to worry about it. They just gonna have to take that stock price hit, you know what I'm saying, and everything like that. So guys, let me know what you guys think. Like, comment, subscribe, everything like that. And we are going to get into our next topic.